It's time to take a funny old walk down memory lane and dive into some of the strangest, funniest, and most embarrassing backstage stories that have likely never made it onto your innocent wrestling radar. Until now. So I'm Gareth, this is What Culture Wrestling, and here are some hilarious backstage wrestling stories you probably didn't know. Kazuchika Okada will always try and steal some Young Bucks gear. Along with being one of the greatest in-ring performers of all time, you may not have realized that Kazuchika Okada is actually a bit of a lovable goofball too. For an example of just how much of a silly legend the former IWGP Heavyweight Champion is, look no further than his insistence on robbing the Young Bucks gear every time he finds himself sharing a backstage area with the Jackson Boys. Just last year, the iconic scamp was at it again, nicking Nick's black and white getup in June and doing something similar in October before teaming with Orange Cassidy against Claudio Castagnoli and Jon Moxley. This fun little joke actually has some rather sweet origins too. When the Bucks and Okada were working together in TNA, Matt and Nick bonded with the eventual Japanese legend Backstage, after going to bat for him when that company were trying to get him to bleed in a match. From there, the eventual AEW EVPs became best buds with Okada, with the Rainmaker then eventually deciding to don their gear during every show they ended up working together, and just surprising them as a third Buck for the fun of it. Wholesome ribs, you love to see it. And I want to know, what's your favorite Okada match? You let me know in the comment section down below. Cody Rhodes and Santino Marella's surreal bodybuilding contest. A cocky young Cody Rhodes actually once decided to poke fun at the physique of his fellow worker Santino Marella. But rather than just accept those harsh words about his body, the former Intercontinental Champion Marella claimed he would be in better shape than the eventual American Nightmare if he simply lost his love handles. And so, after these two egos had hilariously collided backstage during the 2008 European tour in November, it was decided that both men would actually compete in a surreal bodybuilding competition at the WrestleMania 25 after party. Just to really add to the strange occasion, posters similar to the Mega Powers Explode WrestleMania 5 VHS cover were even made to promote this silly little flexing contest. But Marella actually took the whole thing quite seriously in the end, dropping a ton of weight, 30 pounds according to the Star, hiring a posing coach, and grabbing himself some tights for the event. And after showing off his new bod opposite Rhodes during that post-Mania pose-off, the crowd went wild as Triple H apparently scored the contest and handed a ripped Marella the win. What a ride. Steve Austin and Mick Foleys cookie prank on DDP. Before the Stars became some of the most famous legends in the industry, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Mick Foley, and Diamond Dallas Page were actually riding together during a WCW tour, with the eventual superstars also sharing a hotel room together. And it was during this spell traveling as a trio when Foley and Austin began to get annoyed about DDP's decision to parade around the hotel room stark naked before going to sleep. So how did Mick and Steve respond when Dallas refused to alter that bedtime routine? They grabbed some cookies a fan had made for them, crumbled them up over Page's bed while he was out, and then waited for the inevitable meltdown. Wonderful stuff. Sure enough, an infuriated and very much naked DDP launched his own cookie attack on Foley after he discovered the sweet treat mess, getting some chocolate chip revenge on this pair of cookie monsters. So if you didn't already, now you know what happens when you mix DDP with CCC. AJ Styles won't leave until he has defeated Samoa Joe at Tekken 4. Along with battling it out in everywhere from TNA to WWE over the years, the phenomenal AJ Styles and the unstoppable Samoa Joe have also taken their long-running rivalry to another slightly more unexpected location, an arcade. Jumping all the way back to their time throwing down as rivals in Ring of Honor, Joe actually told the story about how the pair ended up clashing on Tekken 4 at the Vans skate park in California. Despite Styles being a passionate lover of video games though, the current AEW star repeatedly defeated the former WWE champion, but AJ simply didn't know when he was beaten and apparently refused to leave until he conquered the big lad. And with Styles' wife watching on and begging for her man to let them leave this dumb Tekken war behind, Joe ultimately explained how he had to let Styles win after whooping him 5 times already. So if you ever find yourself going one-on-one with a phenomenal one online, just know that this hugely and hilariously competitive wrestler will not give up until he's come away with a W. Owen Hart makes Test believe he's stopped the show. From fooling folks into thinking he had a drug problem by dipping his face into a powdered donut, to planting some ridiculously spicy hot sauce into a chili to destroy his colleagues' insides. Owen Hart loved himself a prank, and one of the lesser-known tricks Owen played on his fellow wrestlers involved him prank calling the late Test in 1998. The story goes that WWE were forced to cancel a New York house show that year due to a snowstorm, and with various wrestlers contacting others to inform them that the event wasn't going ahead, Owen saw the chance to have a bit of fun. Test, who was a rookie at this point, was phoned up and was led to believe he was talking to the property manager of the venue said house show was supposed to go down in. It was here when a Hart in disguise asked the talent whether he felt the show should be cancelled or not, and Test eventually responded by saying he'd probably cancel it if it was his call. Without missing a beat, Hart then brought the conversation to an end by letting the naive rookie know that he was now going to ring his boss, Vince McMahon, and tell him that Test had just advised him to call off the incoming event. A master of both grappling and pulling a fast one. Poor old Test never stood a chance, did he? Cheers for watching this video today, folks, and hit that subscribe button down below for more What Culture on your screens. Shawn Michaels has his show stopped by his mum. He may be a sexy boy, but did you know that he was also once quite a naughty one too? In the eyes of Shawn Michaels' own mother, at least. You see, back when the Heartbreak Kid first stepped away from the squared circle due to his destroyed back, Michaels ended up spending time training the next generation. And among that class of young wrestlers was none other than future world champion Bryan Danielson. The American Dragon also recalled in his Yes, My Improbable Journey to the Main Event of WrestleMania book that during one of HBK's classes, the showstopper attempted to teach the class how to get more height on their back body drops. But after his words simply didn't lead to the results he desired from those in attendance, Michaels chose to show them himself. On the back of catching so much air that his foot hit one of the beams on the ceiling though, Michaels' mother then stormed into the room and scolded her baby boy, blasting him for going against doctor's orders not to take a bump. In the blink of an eye, a wrestling legend went from being exactly that to little more than a kid being told off by his incensed mother in front of a whole class of students. How embarrassing. Funny though, Mansur drops a 2 in Shane McMahon's loo. When you've gotta go, you've gotta go, people. And that brings us nicely to a little known story involving former WWE star Mansur very much needing to drop the kids off at the pool back when the company were in Saudi Arabia for Super Showdown 2019. After relieving himself in a toilet the wrestlers had used the last time they were over there within a small dressing room backstage though, Mansur soon realized that things were somewhat different this time around. Upon exiting the bathroom, Mansur actually bumped into a confused-looking Shane McMahon of all people with a few of his bags. How strange. Then, with no towels to dry his hands so he could shake Shane's, and after a pretty awkward introduction, Mansur eventually managed to escape the room/situation. And it was in that moment when he spotted the sign on the door that read Shane McMahon's locker room. That's right, Mansur had just hilariously dropped a number 2 in Shane O'Mac's loo before the show had even begun. I bet he loved it. That pretty awkward interaction was all forgotten by the time Mansur had picked up a win in the massive 51-person Battle Royal later that night, however, with Shane finally shaking the victor's hand and telling him he did a good job in Gorilla shortly after. How lovely. Randy Orton rips off a urinal from one not commonly known toilet tale to another, and to that time Randy Orton collided with a urinal. Yep, you heard that right. As one-time legacy teammate Cody Rhodes would eventually recall, there was a moment there back before the two even properly knew each other when the Viper introduced himself as only Orton could. The wrestlers were in Cape Town, South Africa at the time, and as Rhodes wandered into a men's bathroom, he spotted Randy with his hands on a urinal. His comments of "Hey Code, look at this," were then immediately followed by him yanking said pee bowl straight off the wall. Water inevitably flooded out into the lobby, as the mischievous Orton simply giggled to himself at his own handiwork. But this lunatic wasn't done there, folks. Fast forward to a talent meeting the next day, and after the performers were asked who was responsible for this reckless act, Orton unbelievably strutted to the front of the meeting and ordered his colleagues to tell him who did it. Rhodes understandably thought this guy was completely nuts, and was even more shocked to discover that this menace/mentor had become a less troublesome family man upon returning to WWE in 2022. The days of innocent urinals being terrorized backstage appears to be over then. For now, Booker T drops the trash right in front of the punker. While many will likely be able to remember the infamous story of the legendary Booker T clashing with Batista during the filming of a SummerSlam 2006 commercial, less people are aware of the time the 5-time WCW World Heavyweight Champion once comically butted heads with CM Punk behind the scenes too. So why did the best in the world and the one-time King Booker not exactly see eye to to eye back when they shared a locker room together in WWE? Well, according to Chris Jericho and Cody Rhodes during a Talk Is Jericho episode in 2018, Punk apparently referred to himself as the locker room leader at that point in time. And during a locker room meeting, the voice of the voiceless was said to have told the wrestlers, "As the locker room leader, I'm telling all of you guys to pick up your trash." And how did Booker apparently respond? By hilariously and defiantly chucking his trash right on the floor. A move that must have thrilled the Punker as the two had this whole interaction, according to Cody. It is worth noting that Booker himself has since disputed the incident. But according to Cody at least, this veteran was seemingly not in the mood for Punk's rather comical as the locker room leader nonsense. And Bryan Danielson takes Kane downtown. In another story you may not have heard from the Yes, My Improbable Journey to the Main Event of WrestleMania book, the former Daniel Bryan noted how there was once a day there when him and eventual Blackpool Combat Club pal Cesaro, aka Claudio Castagnoli, had the famous tune Downtown stuck in their heads. With Kane claiming the senior office in the locker room that day, it was only a matter of time before D-Bry snuck his phone into that room with that song blasting out. He then watched on as Glenn Jacobs picked up the musical phone and gave it a puzzled look before shaking his head in disgust at Bryan watching on. He had downtowned him, folks. But this was just the silly beginning. Jump to after the pair's tag match that night, and after successfully ribbing Cesaro by repeatedly nicking and hiding his chair, the Swiss Superman going to grab a new one each time resulted in Bryan ending up with a great many of them. So he put them to good use by piling them up and creating a 6-foot wall in the middle of Kane's office, separating his bags from the room's entry point, also known as a door. After adding the finishing touches of switching the lights off and flinging his phone back in with Downtown playing loudly, Jacobs eventually returned and an unexpected flash of anger crossed his face. This big red machine was fuming, but after spotting the phone playing out that familiar song, Kane soon realized he'd just been well and truly downtown by the American Dragon again and shook his head. It did take a minute. Kane didn't see the funny side of the 6-foot bag blocker at first, but the pair would eventually laugh about the whole ridiculous scenario Bryan had worked hilariously hard on to pull off, and it was in this bizarre moment that the two went from tag partners to friends. Did you enjoy this hilarious backstage wrestling stories you probably didn't know list? Well, check out this 10 wrestling matches with backstories you'll never believe one too. It is ace. Bye bye.